Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. So building a personality-based business like all of my previous companies comes with some major advantages. They're incredibly easy and inexpensive to build. So basically, if you have a laptop and something interesting or educational to share with the world, you're basically in business. But there is a huge downside as well, which is that you can never walk away from it and you can never sell it. Tony Robbins can never be replaced, and neither can Tim Ferriss or Gary Vaynerchuk or myself. So one of my biggest goals is to only build companies that I can sell moving forward. That's one of the primary reasons that I'm branching out into the hydroponic food industry. So why would you want to sell your business anyway? Well, here's the way I look at it. It's basically like a time machine. If you sell your company for 7 times its earnings, you're essentially collecting 7 years worth of reward without 7 more years of work. And in that 7 years that you've just saved, you can go out and start your next venture that inspires you to compound that impact, or you can retire and take it easy and enjoy life. So in order to bring us up to speed on how to sell your company, hopefully for millions of dollars, we're joined by the guy who literally wrote the book on it. His name is John Warrilow, and he is the author of Built to Sell and the founder of the Value Builder System, which is an awesome set of free tools that'll help you increase the value of your company when it's time to sell and actually tell you how much it's worth right now and how much you can sell it for. So if you've ever thought about building a company that you could sell for hopefully 7, 8, or even 9 figures down the road, you're definitely in the right place. And before we jump in, I've got one more piece of news that I'd like to share with you. This coming Monday, February 15th, I'm going to be launching the Self-Made Man Society, where my camera crew and I are going to be taking you on 12 adventures over the next 12 months to provide you guys with 12 lessons that will change your life in a huge, huge way. It is absolutely unlike anything that you've ever seen before. And on our first adventure, I'm going to be taking you to Wisconsin to sit down with Jason Hornung. He's the gentleman who's been running my Facebook ad campaigns for the past 6 months. And we're going to show you how we're selling over $100,000 per month of my courses just by advertising it to cold traffic on Facebook. So to check it out, head over to selfmademansociety.com. I've got a VIP notification list up there for you guys. So that you can join that and you'll be the first to hear about it when it goes live next week. So with that being said, let's dive into the show. And here is John Warrilow. Welcome back, everybody. Mike Dillard here. And today we're going to be having an absolutely fascinating discussion. I'm really looking forward to this episode of Self-Made Man. We're going to be sitting down with John Warrilow, who is an extremely accomplished entrepreneur in his own right, but he specializes in 2 topics that are near and dear to my heart, which is creating subscription businesses in all kinds of industries, and how do you build your company so that you can sell it and so that it can thrive without you. So John, welcome to Self-Made Man.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned a minute ago, I'm really looking forward to this because you're just hitting the nail on the head where I've been in my career and where I'm headed now in the future. And so this is going to be really pertinent to myself, but to my audience as well. And if you don't mind, John, I'll just take a couple of minutes to kind of bring you up to speed on why I think this is such an important subject matter and why I think this is going to be such a valuable episode for everybody out there listening. I started my career as a solo entrepreneur, if you will, about 10 years ago as an information author, if you will, with an information product. I wrote an ebook that did really well that turned into a business with an office and employees and 12 courses, and that became an 8-figure company. And then I did it again in 2010 in the finance space. We did very well. We built that into an 8-figure company within 12 months. So I've built 2 very successful subscription-based businesses. The finance one, we had a membership that sold for $97 a month. And over the course of 3 years, we acquired around 50,000 members. But the challenge with both of those businesses, and with most of the people listening to this call today, a lot of us have our businesses and they're built around ourselves and our personality, which makes them virtually impossible to sell. And I've started to recognize that piece of the puzzle and that it's missing in my particular circumstance. And I'm switching my focus to only building companies that can be acquired and that you can sell. And so I couldn't think of a more perfect person to have on the show today. And I want to thank you for taking the time to join us.
Well, congratulations on your 2 businesses, and I'm thrilled to be here. So thanks.
Thank you. Well, John, if you could, I would love it if you could start with a little bit about your background and your story. You've obviously done a lot with your career over the last 15, 20 years as an entrepreneur. How did you get to where you are today?
I guess the one common theme in my career has been an interest in and a sort of a love for entrepreneurship. So I started out, working in radio. I left a radio station because I had an idea for a radio show about entrepreneurs. I wanted to interview a different entrepreneur every day of the year, kind of like a podcast, but I want to do it on air. And the program director said, never work. And so I left that radio station, created a syndication company, ultimately built that radio show, nationally syndicated show in Canada. Had a market research company where what we were doing was helping big companies, Microsoft, IBM, Google, eBay, understand the small business owner, the entrepreneur. Built an events company with a similar theme. And so today I run this business called the Value Builder System, where we assess and help entrepreneurs build the value of their company over time. So I guess since 93, I've been thinking about entrepreneurs and some of the common mistakes we make as entrepreneurs. And I think you hit on a really good one, Mike, and that is that a lot of us build businesses early based on the force of our personality, our charisma, and those businesses go well to a certain limit, and you reach this sort of ceiling beyond which you cannot go beyond, because there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so much you can do when your personality is sort of the nature of the business. And so it's what we talk about a lot today with the entrepreneurs who go through the Value Builder System is how do you sort of you-proof your company and make it less dependent on you personally and therefore more attractive to an acquirer.
Well, I think that's a great segue. What are the best ways to go about it? How do you take yourself out of the equation so that you can be bought?
We've identified there are 8 unique drivers of the value of any business. And so one of those 8 drivers is something we call hub and spoke. And it relates to how dependent your business is on you as the owner. I remember when we were in market research, I looked at and moderated a group of entrepreneurs, and I had about 8 entrepreneurs around a table. And I said, guys, take a second and draw for me a picture of your role within the company. And, most of the guys around the room, and I think they were all guys, if I remember correctly, I think they were 8 men. Most of them drew the Christmas tree org chart, right? They're them at the top and they're heads of operations and marketing beneath them. 2 drawings for me stood out. One was a guy who drew a picture of himself in a farmhouse looking out of a 2nd floor window. And he was watching, as this is how his picture was drawn, a group of people picking apples from an apple tree. And he had a truck there, a flatbed truck where he was loading the apples into the truck, and eventually it would drive down this dirt road. And I said, explain that for me. And he said, well, I'm the guy sitting in the 2nd floor window watching as, the apple pickers pick the apples. So I thought, that's interesting. Second noteworthy example was someone who drew a picture of a wheel. And he said, look, I'm the hub, and my employees are spokes. My customers are spokes, and my suppliers are spokes. And so when anything needs to be approved, if an employee needs a vacation approved, they come to the hub. If a supplier wants to pitch us a new product, they come to the hub. If the customer wants a discount, they come to the hub. And he was actually proud of the way he was running his company. But as everybody listening here knows, that company owner who thought of themselves as the hub was running a virtually worthless business, because the moment the hub is replaced or is taken out of the equation, the wheel falls apart. And so we give the name the hub and spoke to this management style where we as the owner think of ourselves as sort of a fiefdom leading a group of troops, and all the decisions need to flow through us. And again, that works to a certain volume. Maybe it's 500,000 in sales. Maybe it's $1 million in sales. Maybe it's 5 million. But eventually you sort of reach a ceiling beyond which you cannot grow if you're a hub and spoke kind of management style.
Yeah, very good. I mean, that would be me. So what is the process that you take owners through to change that and to get them out of that position?
Well, we go through something called the scalability trifecta, and it's an exercise we work entrepreneurs through. And it has you really try to identify the products or services in your company that meet the trifecta of scale. So for us, that means that it's the product or service that you have today that is teachable to employees. Number two, valuable to customers, and repeatable. So TVR, teachable, valuable, repeatable. And so what we would do is get a whiteboard out, and we would literally whiteboard all your products and services today. So if you're an information product marketer, for example, we'd write down all the name of your courses, your podcast, all the different things that you do to make money. We'd write them down and rate them on this 3-pronged continuum. How teachable is that to deliver by employees? Or in other words, how dependent it is on you personally. If it's very dependent on you personally, you give it a 0. If it's something you could teach employees to deliver, you give it a 10, and anywhere in between. So teachable, valuable means how commoditized is it? So if it's very commoditized, in other words, there are lots of other people offering the same product or service, you give it a 0. If it's very unique, and in fact, you have a monopoly on that product or service, you give it a 10. And anywhere in between. So that's valuable. And then repeatable relates to how frequently the customer purchases it. So if it's if it's a one-off course that a customer only has to buy once, while that may be a very profitable product, it's probably not the foundation of a sellable company. It's probably a one-off product, in which case you give it a 0. If there, however, is a product where customers have to buy, think of the swimming pool installation company, and it's the chemicals, the chlorine and the chlorine pucks and so forth that customers have to buy on a regular cadence. That is the repeatable nature of what they do. So, anyways, you're going to go through and identify all the products and services that you offer, and then identify how they perform on this teachable, valuable, repeatable spectrum. And then it's really about the next step is to really isolate those products and services that you score the highest on, that have the best potential to scale. And over time, starting to, winnow away or de-emphasize the products and services that score lower. Ultimately, the goal is to have really one product or one product bundle that is scalable. And that gives you the best potential to scale the business outside of your own personal efforts.
Can you give us an example of a company that would meet that criteria, or maybe one that you've helped transform, from the before to the after? And if you have one that incorporates the subscription business model, that you guys talk about as well, that would be awesome.
So take a look at the school photography business. They're based in Danbury, England, and they're in the photography business. And if you think about most photographers, they are personality-driven businesses, highly dependent on the photographer themselves. May make a good living. A good photographer may make $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year if they're at the top of their game, but the business doesn't scale beyond the photographer. So that's the typical way a photographer makes their living, right? They'll shoot, wedding shots, they'll shoot baby shots, T-ball tournaments, and they, charge themselves out by the hour, by the project. And it's a very unscalable, unsexy business. The school photography business, by contrast, said, okay, what part of photography scales? And what they identified was that school photographs, the photographs we as parents all take, buy, of our kids, as they grow up, scales quite nicely because they could teach a young photographer right out of school how to take that school photograph. They give them a formula. They say you got to get in and out in 8 minutes. There's a seating chart that they all do in advance. Stuffed animals to make the kids laugh at just the right moment. So there's a sort of formula that the photographer, the young green photographer follows, so they could teach it to photographers. It's valuable because headmasters in England, which is where the school photography company is based, what do they value? They value time in the classroom. They want the kids learning. They don't want them lurking around the hallways waiting for the school photograph. And again, the school photograph company's promise is we'll get them in and out in 8 minutes. And so they love that they get them in out very quickly. So headmasters are willing to refer. And then finally, repeatable. We as parents want that repeatable. We as parents want to document the kids as they grow up. So therefore, we buy every year that group of photographs to send out to the uncles and aunts and the grandkids and so forth. So that's a model where they've identified in a category that is typically not scalable, photography, they've identified a part or a product or service, school photographs, that does meet the trifecta of scale: teachable, valuable, repeatable. Now, for them, they don't offer it on a subscription basis. Really, the next sort of level up would be to figure out some sort of subscription model. Now, in their case, the headmaster is the customer, and the parent, to a lesser extent, is also a secondary customer. So the headmaster pays their sitting fee, the photography, fee, and then we as parents buy the photographs on subscription. So maybe there's a subscription model they could work out where they say to headmasters, look, one of the 9 subscription models is a simplifier model where the headmaster would agree that the school photography company is going to come in proactively once a year to take the school photographs, and that's understood in advance. And in order for the school to stop that, they would proactively have to call the school photography company to stop the subscription. The simplifier model just states that, for a lot of purchases that we make, it's more of a hassle for us to have to call up and say, oh, can I come in today? Will you come and cut the lawn today? Will you come and, rebalance the chemicals on my swimming pool? Many of us as customers would rather the company just do it on a proactive basis. We'll let you know if we need you to stop. And so that's one of the 9 subscription models. So that would be, I think, the next evolution for the school photography company if they were to sort of automate their renewal. They have a very high renewal rate anyways, but if they could automate that would be, that would turn their business more into a subscriber-based business.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if a company wants to sell, and if they're in a hub and spoke business model, it's very dependent upon the owner. What are the first things that they need to do in order to transform the business to make that possible?
Well, one is a psychological change, and they need to realize that there is a difference between the profit and loss statement of your company and the valuation statement. See, from the beginning, most of us have grown up thinking about business as the profit and loss statement is the report card of the business, right? So, even in your introduction, you said, it was an 8-figure business. So a lot of us sort of tell our stories to one another based on the size of the company. Yeah, we do $1 million in revenue, or, we do $10 million in revenue, whatever. And again, that helps us to sort of, describe what we've done and the success we've had. But again, there's a difference between the size of a business, its revenue, even its profit, and its value. We've got examples of businesses that will trade, for example, at 3 times pre-tax profit. That would be a pretty ho-hum multiple for a small company. And we've got businesses that have traded at 18 or 19 times pre-tax profit. Similar size businesses. The difference being the latter business, the one that trades at an astronomical multiple, is growing very quickly, has got some proprietary technology, has done a great job of differentiating themselves in the marketplace, has recurring revenue, has the 8 factors kind of bundled in. Whereas the ho-hum, 3 times pre-tax profit multiple is probably a service-based business, highly dependent on the owner, maybe 2 or 3 customers, driving most of the revenue. So I think first thing to remember is there's the headspace shift for the owner to say, am I chasing profit? In which case you might want to maximize your profit, beyond any other measure, or am I chasing company value? And you would make very different decisions if it were company value. Very tactically speaking, to give you just one of, a series of tactical decisions you might make, one would be that if your goal was to make your business as profitable as you could, you personally would likely do a lot of the selling. As the entrepreneur, you are probably the most charismatic, probably the best spokesperson for your company, and you would sort of maximize your time dedicated to selling, to working with customers. However, by doing that, you would be undermining the value of your company enormously. So although you would make it very profitable in the short term, you would make it virtually unsellable. So the person chasing, or the entrepreneur chasing value, would say, okay, even though it's going to make me less profitable, I'm going to go hire salespeople and spend my time designing their sales commission structure. and spend my time behind the scenes, working with Salesforce.com or whatever billing platform you use, to sort of give timely updates to the salespeople about their commission, right? All kind of plumbing, crappy, jobs most of us as entrepreneurs don't want to deal with. But that's exactly the thing that's going to drive the value of your company, as opposed to the sexy, fun stuff that it's like mental masturbation. We love the idea of all the ego strokes of going to spend time with clients, all the wonderful things that, the adulation you get from being in the public eye and, the FaceTime with customers, dealing with their issues. All that is wonderful for your ego. It does nothing for the value of your company.
I mean, I'm coming to realize that essentially, if you want to have an exit, you need to build a machine, and it's not just make money. So
it's funny, Mike, Peter Drucker, Peter Drucker died recently, but sort of arguably the biggest thinker in the area of kind of management theory. One of his famous quotes was, for a CEO, they should be spending the majority of their time on two things: sales and marketing and product innovation. And so again, I think a lot of us think that's how we should be spending our time. Yet for your business to be valuable in the eyes of somebody else, if your business is something that others will one day want to acquire, you are going to be taken out of the equation. And therefore, it's those two functions that are so critical to your business success. Again, sales and marketing and product innovation. It's those two functions that, as counterintuitive as it feels, you've got to get in the hands of other people. Because that's when people, outsiders, acquirers, private equity companies will look at your business and say, okay, this thing's got legs beyond the owner. The only alternative is that you get acquired for an earnout. And an earnout is the enemy for any entrepreneur. It basically says, Mike, we're going to buy your company, and we think it's worth $10 million, but we think you're pretty, you're important to the equation. So we're going to give you $100,000 up front. And then we're going to give you $9.9 million if in the future you reach 6 goals that we set out for you. And you're now an employee. If you agree to that deal, I would never advise you do, but if you agree to that deal, you would then be an employee in a company and have virtually no influence on your ability to hit those 6 goals that your new owner, your new boss has put out for you. And so, for Built to Sell Radio, the podcast I do, we talk to people all the time about, earnouts gone bad, where they've sort of gone through and agreed to a deal where they're taking very little money up front, all of it on the come, all of it in the future, and realize that all of a sudden as an employee in a big company, you have no control over hitting your goals, or very little control over hitting your goals.
Yeah, agreed. One of the other questions that pops in my head right now is, how do you establish a fair valuation for your business? And is that something that the Value Builder system helps identify, or what role does that platform play in this process?
Everyone who goes through and works with us at the Value Builder system, the first thing they're going to do is complete the Value Builder questionnaire, and that's going to spit out a valuation. So that's going to be an estimate of value based on your profitability, but more so the 8 key drivers of company value. Each of those 8 drivers, our algorithm will show you what influence it has on the overall value of your business. So that is at first an easy step to get an estimate of value. Ultimately, though, it's cliche to even say it, the value of your company is in the eyes of the beholder, is in the person looking at buying your company. That's why you're never going to put a price on your business. One of the biggest mistakes we see entrepreneurs make is they will say to a potential acquirer what they want for the business. So, you're running your company, some big company executive comes to you and says, wow, we think your business is great, Mike. Would you ever think about selling it? You say, yeah, for the right price, sure, I'd sell it. And then they say, well, Mike, what do you think it's worth? And you say, well, I'm not sure. And what do you think it's worth? And they'll say, well, just give me a rough guideline of what you think the thing's worth. And you might throw out, $10 million, let's say. Well, immediately you have put a ceiling beyond which you will never get more than $10 million for your business. Most likely the professional buyer will realize, they can get your business for much less than that.
Right.
So you never want to put a price on your business. You let the market determine the price for your business. So while we can give you an estimate of value, you would never reveal that to a potential buyer. That's something for the buyer to decide.
And so is that where both parties really rely on a valuation? And I haven't gone through this process, so I'm really curious as to how this works, because I can go get a valuation from somewhere. They're going to come up with one number. The potential buyer could go get another valuation from another party, come up with a very different number. And so how does this negotiation process typically work?
So again, the offer and what the business is worth is in the domain of the potential buyer. So they'll decide using their own formula how they will value your business. And what you'll find is that there are two types of external buyers for your business. There are financial buyers and strategic buyers. So financial buyer would be a buyer, typically a private equity company, could be a family office or just a relatively wealthy individual. They can say, okay, I want to buy this business. And what they are buying, this is important for folks to hear, what they are buying is your future stream of profit. Most of us as entrepreneurs think, my customer list is important. My location's great. I've been in business since 1950s. All these things that we think drive our value, they don't. For a financial buyer, they are buying one thing. They are buying your future stream of profit. And so to decide what they think they're willing to pay, to spend to buy that, they do something called discounted cash flow. So they will basically place a present value on your future stream of profit. They will say, what is it worth to me today to own a company that is likely over the next 5 or 10 years to spit out whatever X $100,000 in profit every year. And that's something called discounted cash flow. You could Google it to see how you can do it. Rather than get in the mechanics of how to do a discounted cash flow valuation on your business, know that the primary drivers of DFC are how much profit you expect to make in the future, how reliable those estimates are, so how much recurring revenue you have and how dependent they are on one customer, et cetera. How reliable are those estimates? And number 3, the cost of capital. So how much is it going to cost the acquirer to acquire the capital to buy your business? And in a low interest rate environment like we have today, it's very inexpensive from a cost per capital, which is why you see valuations starting to bubble up. So that's the financial buyer. And so again, if you want to, and they generally buy companies at a slightly lower multiple than the strategic buyer. And the strategic buyer, typically a big company, typically in your industry or in your ecosystem, in some way, shape, or form. And for them, they place a value on your business less based on discounted cash flow, but more on what your business is worth in their hands. So let me give you an example. When Microsoft, for example, bought Skype, you may recall they spent $8.5 billion to buy Skype. And Skype at the time was losing money. So using a discounted cash flow methodology, technically Skype was worthless. Yet, because Microsoft was making a strategic acquisition, they saw it in their hearts to spend $8.5 billion to buy Skype. Why is that? Well, for Microsoft, they were not valuing it based on discounted cash flow. They were saying, what is it worth in more sales of Microsoft Office, Windows, Xbox, and all the other products Microsoft owns to own Skype? How many more people could we upgrade from Windows 7 to Windows 10 if we embedded gracefully the Skype application? What's it worth to have, whatever it is, 100 million usernames, many of which are gaming on an alternative platform, to get them to migrate over to Xbox? And so they would have been doing the math. So if you've got 1 billion machines, which Microsoft at the time had about 1 billion machines running Windows, and you can get 10% of them to upgrade, that's 100 million upgrades. Let's say it's $100 to upgrade. That's a $10 billion opportunity. So again, the way you're going to value your company from the strategic's perspective is how much more of their products are they going to be able to sell by buying you? And as an entrepreneur wanting to get the maximum price for your business, that's what you really want to help them understand. Less about how you're going to help, sell more of your stuff. You want to show them that by buying you, you're going to help them sell more of their stuff.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Same with Facebook buying Instagram, for $3 billion. Same premise. So that makes a lot of sense. And It's really clear to see why having a subscription-based revenue model built into your business makes so much sense when it comes to creating that predictable profit stream, especially for the financial buyers that you just mentioned. And I'm assuming that's why you ended up really focusing on that subject matter with the book that you wrote as well.
That's right. I mean, when we talk to entrepreneurs about recurring revenue and the importance, again, it comes back to philosophy. When an acquirer looks to buy your business, the first question they're going to say is, wow, Mike's got this $10 million business. That's amazing. And they're going to say, yeah, but what happens if Mike leaves? Or what happens if we write a check for Mike for $10 million and he goes off to the beach? What's left? And so the more recurring revenue you have, the more you can say, no, it's not dependent on Mike. It's dependent on, we've got this recurring revenue engine going. And so when I talk to entrepreneurs about the idea of recurring revenue, most of the time entrepreneurs go, yeah, I get it. I understand, but I can't create recurring revenue because I'm in the manufacturing space, or I've got an information product and we work on a product lifecycle basis, or, I own a car wash, or, whatever, fill in the blank industry you're in, they say they can't do it. And they're jealous sometimes, frankly, or envious, maybe a more favorable way to look at it, of software companies that have the SaaS-based business model. And what I would say to them is that actually, no matter what industry you're in, there is a subscription model you can adopt to create some recurring revenue. We identified 9 unique recurring revenue subscription models for the book, The Automatic Customer. And so virtually any industry can find some subscription revenue. I'll give you an example. Amazon.com, for example. Amazon has got arguably more at stake than any Fortune 500 company on the subscription business model. You know that Amazon Prime has now 10 million subscribers, on the way to something like 27 million is the estimate, paying $100 a year. It is a huge business for Amazon. They've now got Amazon Mom, which is diapers. They bought diapers.com, diapers on subscription. Amazon Fresh, their food delivery business, is now on a subscription-based model. So all, groceries, diapers, all of the content through Amazon Prime has all been gone from, the transaction business model, call us when you run out, to, no, we'll replenish it on a subscription basis. And so, again, there are these 9 different models. I think any company from, a lawyer to a manufacturer can at least leverage some of them.
Now, given that fact, is there a specific period of time that a potential buyer would like to see as far as a customer history goes, or a customer value? For example, the company that I'm working on right now, that I'll be launching later in the year, is a hydroponic system for food production. And so it's fully automated. This will grow roughly $4,000 or $5,000 a year in organic food in your house. You don't have to do anything, and it is reliant upon consumables in the form of liquid nutrients that you'll have to replace the bottles in the system every so often. Now, how much history do I need to have to a potential buyer to generate an ideal valuation? Is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years before they feel confident in a number to make an offer, and I feel confident that the offer is going to be fair in my circumstance?
So the more the better, obviously. So if you've got 3 years, that's going to give them a high degree of confidence in the numbers, in particular if they're consistently, if the numbers are consistent. If they're wildly different from 1 year to the next, they're going to say that, it's not stable. You haven't settled in on what is a kind of a normal run rate for your business. So if, for example, if 1 year your churn rate is 1%, and the next year it's 27%, and the next year it's 3%. Even though you have 3 years of churn numbers, it's not going to give a buyer a lot of confidence that you know what your churn is going to be in the future. If, however, every year for the last 3 years, your churn rate has been 8%, it's been hovering between 8 and 9% every year for 3 consecutive years, guess what? They're going to know that year 4, year 5, year 6, they're likely to see an 8 or 9% churn rate. And they can then build their models based on that. So I think ideally you're going to want to show them as long as possible. 3 years is a great runway with the caveat that, 3 consistent years is going to be much more valuable than 3 very, very sporadic years. You can also, one of the things that you're going to want to do for a potential buyer, if you're based on a subscription model, is to figure out your lifetime value of a subscriber. And so that's going to be really important to a potential buyer, because they're going to look at it in relation to the cost of acquiring a subscriber. And so there's a ratio that all buyers in subscription businesses look at, whether it's private equity companies, venture capital, or just, strategics. They're looking at your LTV to CAC ratio. LTV stands for lifetime value. CAC stands for customer acquisition costs. And what they're looking for is a minimum 3-to-1 ratio. In other words, you've got to capture at least 3 times the value 3 times the amount of money it costs you to acquire a customer in lifetime value of that customer, because that's the only way you're going to be able to scale, have money to build and product develop, et cetera, et cetera. So it's the 3-to-1 ratio. If you're south of 3-to-1, very few customers are going to be interested. They're going to say, this thing doesn't scale. You're basically on a death spiral. But if it's north of 3-to-1, especially if it's 4 or 5-to-1, you're going to have a lineup of people wanting to buy that business, because again, that's really the threshold, 3-to-1. So to figure out, it means that you got to figure out 2 numbers. One, you got to figure out your lifetime value. The another number you got to figure out is your CAC. So for lifetime value, it's a very specific formula. Basically, it's your average monthly recurring revenue per customer. So let's say in the hydroponics business, it's $100 a month, just for round numbers. Mm-hmm. On average, your average customer spends about $100 a month with you. You're then going to multiply that number by your margin, your gross margin. And usually in a product business, it's the costs of buying the thing you sell on subscription. So let's say the chemicals cost you, 40% of every dollar you make goes to buying the chemicals. So your margin is 40%, your gross margin is 60%. Because the costs are 40. So now your times 100 times 60 is you're left with $60. And then you're going to divide that by your monthly churn rate. So if you have a churn rate of 3% a month, for example, you'd be dividing that number by 0.03.
And churn rate you define as a customer that leaves, that ends their subscription.
I'm talking about revenue churn rate. So you can measure churn by revenue or by customer. And I'm talking about, in this calculation, revenue churn rate. So if you have $1,000 of recurring revenue coming into the month, and you have, for example, $100 cancel, you're left with $90 of recurring revenue, or you have a 10% revenue churn rate.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So on a revenue churn rate, so you're dividing it by your revenue churn rate. And that's going to give you your lifetime value. So again, it's MRR per customer, monthly recurring revenue per customer, multiplied by your margin, divided by your churn rate. And you're going to get a LTV, or lifetime value of a subscriber. And your CAC is very easy. It's your average cost to acquire a single customer. So basically, in a given period of time, usually a month, you stuff all of the sales and marketing expenses you have in a given month, your SEO, your SCM, your Salesforce.com license, your HubSpot license, your salespeople, your commissions, all your sales and marketing expenses. And then you divide it by the number of subscribers you want in that time period. And then you're going to get an average CAC per customer. And so what you're looking for is to make sure that the LTV is at least 3 times that of the CAC.
That makes total sense. And
I hope this podcast has some show notes, because that's a lot of numbers to consume.
Well, the good news is I have the help of a very talented editor who does a great job pulling the notes out. So thank you, Jason.
Just go buy the book. It's like $20.
even better. We'll be sure to have links for the book on Amazon as well, without a doubt. And speaking of that, part of your value builder process is something that you call the envelope test. And I was wondering if you could dive into that, because it definitely has a catchy name to it.
Yeah, it comes from the name, a story in the book Built to Sell, where the protagonist, the entrepreneur, a guy named Alex Stapleton, is asked by his mentor, a guy named Ted, what's the value that you would sell this company for? What's your walk away number? In other words, if somebody came in tomorrow and said, look, I've got a check here for, X million dollars. I would like the keys to your business. At what point do you make that exchange? Write that down on an envelope, on a cue card, a recipe card, put it in an envelope and seal it. And the story then transpires over a couple of years. And the reality is that for most of us, that number changes, right? As the business grows, we all of a sudden, start to get a higher and higher number of what our envelope is. And what we really encourage people to think about is what is their number, and remember that, so that when they get into the heat of negotiation, they're not, their ego and their emotions don't take over the negotiation, because the negotiation to buy your business, in the case of Alex Stapleton, when he goes to sell his company and built to sell, some things go wrong in the negotiation. And there are some games that are played and the price of the business goes down, and he is asked to accept a different price than was originally offered. And it's at that point that Ted, the mentor figure, says, hey, open up that envelope I asked you to put away a couple of years ago. Is the lower price still higher than what your envelope says? If yes, then what are you worried about? Basically. And so it's a way for entrepreneurs to, one, not let inflation take that number to start sort of moving, being a moving target. And number two, sort of stripping away some of the emotion around selling your business and the negotiations sort of tactics that acquirers use, kind of stripping that out and remembering kind of why you're doing this in the first place.
That makes a lot of sense. One part of this process that doesn't come up very often, but that is extremely important, is assuming that your goal is to sell your business in the next couple of years, structuring it in a way that is favorable from a tax standpoint. Any advice on that?
It really is highly dependent on the jurisdiction that you're in. So, for example, I happen to live in Toronto, where we have a tax treatment which allows an entrepreneur to pull out, I think it's now up to $800,000 of capital gains free without any tax. Now, it's different in the United States. It's different in New Zealand. It's different in Australia. So talk to an accountant about your capital gains exemption rates. But usually in many economies, there's going to be an exemption rate where you either have a low or no tax amount of money you can pull out on the sale of a business. And then a lot of entrepreneurs will, again, structure things so that some of the shares are in the hands of either their spouse, so that they too can get that exemption or lower capital gains rate, and in some cases in the hands of a trust, maybe in the name of your kids as beneficiaries or a charity that you're passionate about or whatever. But the trust can also, in some cases, get access to, because it's a legal entity, that capital gains exemption. And so, again, I'm not an accountant, and I don't want to pass this off as accounting advice because it's not intended that way. My only advice in this area is talk to a local accountant, someone who knows your tax laws well. Reveal to them in confidence that your intention is to build to sell, and then have them structure things now so that you're going to have the highest take home after tax sort of windfall from the sale of your company. And keep in mind that in some jurisdictions, again, it varies by country, the entity has to hold the shares for a period of time. So, for example, if you sold your business tomorrow and you structured a bunch of trusts, for example, or moved the shares to your spouse or your kids, for example, today, they would not be able to replicate your capital gains exemption. They have to hold those shares. Usually it's a period of 2 or 3 years before you can apply for that exemption or lower, tax capital gains rate. So long story short, if your plan is to sell 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, really important to talk to an accountant now, get it structured right, so you'll be able to draw out as much, after tax as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was the most important piece, which is that preparation, like you just mentioned, needs to happen now. It has to happen years before you actually sell, not at the time of the sale or it's too late. So definitely keep that in mind.
There's also tax treatment. When you sell a business, you can sell its shares or you can sell its assets. And most acquirers want to buy the assets. Most sellers want to sell the shares. And so, that's a negotiation point. The reason most buyers don't want to buy the assets, want to buy the assets, not the shares, is the shares come with the liabilities of the company, right? So you've got an disgruntled employee lurking in the wings who's going to take advantage of a new buyer and sue the company. They are liable for that when they buy the shares. If they buy the assets, well, they're just buying the customer list and the logo and so forth, and you can't claim any degree of liability over those things. So again, that's going to be a negotiation point, but depending on your tax jurisdiction, the sale of shares can be treated differently from a tax perspective than the sale of assets. So again, lots more complicated reasons to talk to an accountant in your market to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So last question here. Let's say that somebody's listening to this, they're like, you know what? I want to, one, see what my business is worth, and then two, go ahead and sell it. What's the first step in that process? Because, as of right now, your option is, if you're new to this process, is, go to bizbuysell.com and make a listing, which I'm assuming is not the best approach to take.
No, I mean, without sounding too self-serving, I would go to valuebuildersystem.com and complete the questionnaire there. It'll give you a report and it will include an estimate of value. So at least you have a rough sense of what your company is worth. Step two, I would hire an intermediary. So an intermediary is a mergers and acquisitions professional or a business broker. The difference is the size of the company. So typically a mergers and acquisitions professional will represent your company. If you think your company is worth in excess of $5 million, sometimes they're a bit choosier and say $10 million. But an M&A professional is going to be your best bet if your business is worth, let's say, in excess of $5 million. They're going to work on what's called a Lehman formula, typically, where they take a percentage of the sale price on a sliding scale. So they may take, I'm making these numbers up, but it might be 5% on the first 5 million, could be 3% on the next 5 million, et cetera. So they're going to take a big chunk of the sale price. But in my experience, they're worth their money, because they're going to create competitive tension for your deal, and they're going to run the process. And it's a kind of a once in a lifetime thing. And in my opinion, they make their money back usually, with a multiple, because, they create some competitive tension for your deal. If your company is smaller than 5 million in value, you're going to be better served by a business broker. And a business broker will charge, similarly, they charge a higher percentage. Typically on the first million, might be 10% on the first million. They work with smaller companies generally. The difference, again, one of the key differences is the business broker will typically sell your business without you giving them a retainer fee or a work fee, whereas the M&A professional will usually ask you for a retainer, typically $50,000 or $60,000 as a deposit on the success fee. So it forces you to really want to sell to hire them. Otherwise, they'd just be spending all their time. Yeah. So that's the next step, I think, is get representation. I mean, it's going to be a huge, you probably bigger than the sale of your home. Most of us wouldn't sell our homes without a real estate agent. And I don't think you should sell your business without a good intermediary.
No, that's extremely valuable advice. So any final words of wisdom for the entrepreneurs out there who are listening to this when it comes to building their businesses, specifically with the intention in mind someday of having an opportunity to sell, at least having that option?
Without repeating something I've already said, the risk of repeating something I've already said, I should say, it really does come down to an important philosophical decision. Are you building your company to maximize its profits every year? In which case, that's great. Don't then reinvest all the profits. Make sure you take them out, because there will be no big payday at the end. I've seen lots of examples of entrepreneurs building great businesses, pouring tons, making lots of profit on paper, but putting it all back into building, thinking that one day there's going to be this great payday. At the end, there's nothing left because there's nothing to sell because they built something to maximize profit. So if you're philosophically chasing profit, then chase profit. That's great. And dividend out the money every year and know that that's the value you're going to get. If your goal is build value, you're going to make decisions along the way that are actually going to diminish or lessen your profit year to year, but hopefully increase your value. And I think the worst example or the worst place to be is the kind of no man's land where you're sort of in between. You sort of want to pull some money out of the company and you kind of want to sell it. You kind of want to sell it, but you also want to make some money along the way. That's when you start making really bad decisions.
So that leads me to a quick question for you. Is there a multiple or added value placed on cash that's in the business? Let's say you've got $2 million, in the business in cash, which is a pretty substantial, I guess, form of savings, right? Depending upon your overall annual revenue. Is that valued at cash face value, or is there a benefit to that, having that in the bank account as well for the business?
Well, there's certainly no multiple applied to it. So, your retained earnings. So most entrepreneurs, when they've got some money in the bank, they would characterize them as kind of a rainy day fund, right? So if you have been making money over the last 10 years and each year money, you make $100,000 and you don't dividend out to yourself, you leave it in the business, rainy day fund, there's no point in paying all that tax. So you just leave it in the company. Most entrepreneurs would argue to a buyer, well, that's my money, right? That's profit from 10 years ago. I'm going to pull that out of the company when I go and sell it. And most buyers would say, well, wait a minute, that's your working capital. We need that in the business when we take it over because we're buying your business and you need to leave the working capital in the business. And so your working capital calculation is going to be the second most important number on an offer to buy your business. The most important number is obviously the number that they're willing to give you for your business. But the second most important number is how they plan and intend to calculate working capital. Because again, it's usually something like, the business has to keep at least $100,000 of working capital in its accounts when you hand over the keys, or it's 60% of accounts receivable on the day that the acquisition deal is consummated, or some other formula. But there'll be a formula that a professional buyer uses to calculate working capital, and that's going to be a negotiation point. Because to use your example, if you've got $2 million in the business, you're going to want to pull that out before you sell it. They're probably going to want to leave it in, and so it's going to be a negotiation point. And so leaving that in question or leaving it vague is just a nightmare waiting to happen. So make sure before you sign any offer to sell your business that the offer stipulates the working capital calculation and you're comfortable with that.
That's extremely, extremely valuable insights that is all new to me and unbelievably appreciated. So John, thank you so much for your time today. And guys, I would really encourage you to go check out John's work over at valuebuildersystem.com. You can plug your data into their system that they have over there to get a value for your business. And he's also got a series of great videos as well on how to increase the value of your business if you're going to prepare it for potential sale. So this has been unbelievably educational, John. So I really appreciate your time today.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. And we will see you guys next week. Once again, thank you so much for joining us here today at Self-Made Man. I really appreciate all of your support. We had our biggest month ever last month in January. We're closing in on 70,000 downloads a month, over 2,000 downloads a day. I really would love to get to that 100,000 download per month milestone. And the only way I can get there is with you telling others about the show, getting involved, leaving a review on iTunes, and really just helping us spread the word on Twitter and Facebook and our other social media outlets. This is 100% organic, and I'm so happy and thrilled that y'all have been loving the show and getting value from it and that it's growing. So once again, thank you for your continued support, and we will see you next week.
One track of mine.